Welcome to All Things Money with David Blain, a thoughtful and revealing discussion of actionable ideas and effective strategies to help you through the complex world of investing, taxes, and real estate. Now, with All Things Money, here's David Blain.
Hello and welcome to All Things Money. I'm your host for the show, David Blain. We thank you for joining us, either on the radio, 94.1 FM WNBU, or on cable TV 10 in New Bern. We thank you for tuning in today. We've got a great show in store for you. Our ideas for the show mostly come from our viewers and listeners like you. So if you have any comments or questions or topics you'd like us to address, please feel free to give us a call. Our number is 252-633-0107. Our email is allthingsmoney@dlblain.com. That's allthingsmoney@dlblain.com. And if you can't remember any of that, just go to the web, dlblain.com. There you'll find our contact information about myself, my firm, as well as archived copies of the show. So we look forward to hearing from you, what's on your mind, what financial concerns you have, what you like about the show, what you don't like. So without further ado, let's get into the show today. There's a lot of talk, unless you've been on a deserted island for the past couple of months, there's been a lot of talk about the debt limit, default, all sorts of different things. And we touched on this last week, and I'm going to reiterate it because we've got to get some sort of information out there to counter what I consider is mostly a political circus. The debt crisis in Europe does have some significant investment implications. The U.S. debt situation, in my opinion, is mostly a political and media issue. So let's talk about that a little bit. The other day, Tim Geithner implied that the U.S. might default on its publicly held debt, and the President Obama himself said that, I quote, "It is not acceptable for us not to raise the debt limit and to allow the U.S. government to default. We cannot threaten the United States full faith and credit for the first time in our nation's history." And I just want to set the record straight. There is virtually no possibility of a default, as the President spoke about. There's a lot of political posturing, a lot of fear-mongering about default in the debt, and, grandma's going to die of starvation and things like that. And that's just not the case. The fear of default and the catastrophic consequences that would follow, they're trying to force people to come into, if you're on the Democratic side, they're trying to force the Republican side to accepting tax increases, and so far this has not worked. Why has this not worked? Because most people understand that the debt ceiling, although it's related, is not the same thing as defaulting on the debt. In the unlikely event that on August 2nd the U.S. hits the real debt ceiling, the federal government would still be on track to collect $2.2 trillion in this fiscal year. That would not change. And the net interest for the year is about $205 billion, or less than a tenth of the incoming revenue. And so, unless the Treasury Secretary Geithner or President Obama just completely lost their mind, there would be no way that they would not ensure that the interest payments were made on time and in full, as well as any principal redemptions that may come true. So the only possibility of a default would be if the Treasury Secretary and the President, for some unknown, bizarre reason, intentionally defaulted on the debt, but not raising the debt ceiling. There's over $2 trillion coming into the federal Treasury this year, and the interest is only about $205 billion. And the Treasury could simply use its ample cash on hand to pay off creditors and then prioritize payments for the various social and military programs. And so if the default on the debt, which is the worst thing, is just not going to happen. They could delay Social Security. They could have a federal government shutdown to save money. They could delay paying government contractors. There's all sorts of options that they could use, none of them which are perfect, but I want to remove the specter of default on the debt. The United States is not Zimbabwe and under imminent threat of defaulting on its debt. The other thing, when you're trying to figure out, this is what we do. We look at data. We ignore the financial press. We ignore CNBC. We ignore all that stuff, and we look at the data. And when you look at the data, the fact is the credit markets are basically ignoring this whole debt crisis. In fact, U.S. Treasuries have gained about 6% on the year, and the long-term Treasury rates have actually fallen. Okay, if a country is about to default on its debt, or the credit markets feel like there's a big possibility of default, you see interest rates going up. You look at the interest rates for Greece, look at the interest rates for Ireland, look at the interest rates for Italy. These are countries that there is a good possibility of default, and the interest rates are going up. Interest rates on U.S. Treasuries are going down, and so that should help give you an idea of what the credit markets think about what's going on right now. In fact, we see the 10-year Treasury a few days ago was around 3.15%, dropped another 20 basis points to 2.95%. Who knows? Maybe the credit markets just aren't paying attention. Maybe the whole bond market is on vacation and no one is paying attention. Or maybe the specter of defaulting on the debt is overblown. So anyway, to summarize, we think that the prospect of the U.S. defaulting on its debt is extremely unlikely. As I mentioned, the delay in the pay of Social Security, Medicare, military, contractors' payment, these things are possible. And so the potential pain becomes more apparent to the average citizen, and we would expect to see a rise in yields going into this situation. The bond market will let us know if there is a problem. If the rates start rising, you will know that there's something. Now, I, for one, try not to get it too political, but I think they will come to some sort of compromise. I don't know what it is, but I do think that they will come to some sort of compromise that will allow the debt ceiling to be raised as well as a reduction in spending. So we're going to continue covering a few more of these things. We also want to talk a little bit about the dollar. What is the effect on the dollar with this? Once again, we look at the markets, and as the markets hit turmoil, debt crisis in Europe and things like that, the value of the dollar is actually going up. So we're going to take a short break. For All Things Money, I'm David Blain, and when we come back, we'll continue this discussion about the debt crisis and the U.S. dollar.